Self-esteem signifies an individual's self-assurance in their worth, abilities, or ethics. It incorporates beliefs about oneself and a range of emotions, encompassing joy, despair, pride, and humiliation. Smith and Mackey define self-esteem as the positive or negative self-evaluation based on our self-concepts. The concept of self-esteem has widespread applications as it is linked with various outcomes such as academic success, happiness, satisfaction in relationships, and criminal behavior. The rewards of high self-esteem include improved mental and physical health and less antisocial behavior. Meanwhile, low self-esteem can lead to anxiety, loneliness, and substance abuse vulnerability. The concept is applicable globally and to specific attributes. Psychologists typically view self-esteem as a long-lasting personality characteristic, though temporary fluctuations also exist. The term has synonyms like self-worth, self-regard, self-respect, and self-integrity. The notion of self-esteem originated in the 18th century, traced back to Scottish Enlightenment scholar David Hume's writings. Hume suggested that self-value and self-favorable thinking serve a motivational function that encourages people to maximize their full potential. Philosophical theorist and psychologist William James further identified self-esteem as a unique psychological construct. He revealed two hierarchical levels of the self, processes of knowing, the I self, and resultant knowledge about the self. The me self, the scrutiny of I self leading to knowledge about the material self, social self, and spiritual self forms the me self, according to James. The social aspect aligns closely with self-esteem, encapsulating all attributes acknowledged by others. The material self reflects the body and its possessions, and the spiritual self includes descriptive and evaluative thoughts about oneself. This conceptualization of self-esteem as an assembly of personal attitudes remains even today. In the mid-1960s, Morris Rosenberg defined self-esteem as a feeling of self-worth and devised the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale, the most widely used self-esteem measure in the social sciences. Early 20th century behaviorism discouraged introspective mental process study, emphasizing behavior study in relation to the environment. Instead, it saw humans as creatures subject to reinforcements, advocating for psychology as an experimental science comparable to chemistry or biology. Beginning in 1997, the technique of core self-evaluations incorporated self-esteem as one of the four main dimensions in self-assessment, along with locus of control, neuroticism, and self-efficacy. This method, which has demonstrated a steady correlation with job satisfaction and performance, places significant emphasis on self-esteem as a critical element. Around the 1970s, self-esteem began to receive recognition and support from several governmental and non-governmental entities, leading to a widespread self-esteem movement. This movement is an exemplary display of the influence of psychological research on shaping public policies. The fundamental principle of this movement is the belief that individual and societal issues primarily stem from low self-esteem. Prominent psychologist Nathaniel Branden defended this theory by linking low self-esteem to an array of psychological issues. However, this belief appeared to be more closely related to Western individualistic societies, given the non-existence of low self-esteem in collectivist nations like Japan. In a bid to address these presumed damaging effects of low self-esteem, John Vasconcellos, a member of the California Assembly, successfully established and financed the Task Force on Self-Esteem and Personal and Social Responsibility in 1986. He believed that by encouraging self-esteem, the task force could tackle a broad range of state issues. The task force initiated a comprehensive review of the self-esteem literature and formed committees across numerous California counties. Despite finding only marginal correlations between low self-esteem and its supposed implications, the authors of the summary report maintained that self-esteem was a significant variable influencing societal problems. The task force ceased operations in 1995, which led to the creation of the National Council for Self-Esteem, and subsequently, the National Association for Self-Esteem, to carry forward their mission. Several renowned figures, including Anthony Robbins, Bernie Siegel, and Gloria Steinem, formed a part of this coalition. The sociometer theory posits that self-esteem is an evolutionary tool to assess one's social position and approval within their group. Similarly, terror management theory argues that self-esteem provides a safeguard against life's uncertainties. Including death humanistic psychologist Carl Rogers asserted that self-hatred and self-devaluation are the root causes of many people's challenges. He advocated for the unconditional acceptance of individuals as a means to enhance their self-esteem. Steadfastly providing positive affirmation in his therapeutic work, this perspective ushered in the recognition of self-esteem as a universal human right. Assessing self-esteem involves various instruments like the Rosenberg Self-Esteem Scale, (RSIS), which gauges a participant's agreement with self-referential statements. Meanwhile, the Cooper-Smith inventory uses comparison to others across various domains to assess self-esteem. Secure self-esteem results in a rating of well-adjustment, but internal shame could indicate vulnerability to social deviance. From the 1980s, implicit self-esteem measures based on cognitive processing gained popularity. These methodologies, including the name-letter task and the implicit association task, aim to mitigate the awareness of being assessed. They involve the use of self-related stimuli, and the speed of identifying positive or negative stimuli is considered indicative of implicit self-esteem. Experiences play a crucial role in shaping self-esteem, particularly in the formative years. Parents notably influence their child's self-esteem by becoming the primary sources of their positive and negative experiences. Unconditional love reinforces a child's sense of value and respect, establishing a strong foundation for self-esteem in later life. Notably, elementary students with high self-esteem usually have authoritative but caring parents who consistently provide support, define clear expectations, and involve them in decision-making. Students can often grapple with lowered self-esteem during their academic years. This can be due to an absence of scholastic successes or a challenging home life. Social interactions also play a significant role in shaping a student's self-perception as students progress through school. They start to identify differences between themselves and their classmates. The comparisons they draw impacting their self-esteem and influencing their self-perception. Adolescence is a fragile period, with peer influence gaining prominence. Students' self-assessment often stems from their relationships with friends. Successful friendships contribute to higher self-esteem, while rejection and loneliness can lead to self-doubts and lower self-esteem. Adolescence generally indicates an upswing in self-esteem, which continues through young adulthood and middle age. However, a decline is observed from middle age to old age. Factors like health conditions, cognitive abilities, and socioeconomic status could contribute to this change. Typically, there is no gender difference noted in the progression of self-esteem. Also, generational shifts in societal context like grade inflation or the prevalence of social media do not seem to affect the trajectory of self-esteem. High levels of achievement, lower risk-taking propensity, and good health are indicators of higher self-esteem. Emotionally stable, outgoing, and conscientious individuals generally have higher self-esteem, speaking to its trait-like qualities. Hispanic adolescents may have slightly lower self-esteem than their black and white peers initially, but this tends to increase by the age of 30. African Americans show a sharper increase in self-esteem during adolescence, but may experience a quicker decrease in later life compared to their white counterparts. Feelings of shame, usually resulting from socially evaluated poor performances, can exacerbate self-esteem issues. Adequate self-compassion can counterbalance the rise in shame. The progression of self-evaluation can be characterized in terms of the real self, the ideal self, and the dreaded self. These self-perceptions evolve sequentially in children as they cognitively develop. Stages of self-growth comprise processes where individuals define their ideal and real selves based on attitudes and behaviors. A failure to meet social norms or a tendency towards self-centeredness often characterizes the feared self-image. Similarly, individuals construct their understanding of self around harmonious identities if they fail to align with their personal ideals due to real-life issues. They often perceive their feared self. This evolution process incorporates increasingly intricate moral obligations. At this stage, a person might experience a dip in self-esteem if they can't meet certain expectations, causing significant impact if they feel they are evolving into their feared self. In the course of this development, individuals can become staunch believers in certain values and principles, willing to defend them against opposition, but flexible enough to adjust based on experience. They also learn to trust their decisions without guilt, to let go of the past and future worries while focusing on the present, and to have faith in their problem-solving abilities, seeking help when needed. A balance sets in where individuals see themselves as equal in worth to others without feeling inferior or superior. They understand their significance to others, particularly friends, and can resist manipulation while choosing to work with others for mutual benefit. They accept various internal feelings, sharing them with others selectively, and show sensitivity towards others' feelings and needs, respecting societal norms, and discarding any desire to prosper at others' expense. They strive for solutions without devaluing themselves during challenges. However, while some people with high self-esteem need no validation from others, others with defensive high self-esteem crave constant reassurance. Despite scoring high on self-assessment scales, they are often plagued by subconscious self-doubts and insecurities and react badly to criticisms. These individuals require continual positive feedback to sustain their self-worth, often leading to arrogant, boastful behavior or escalating to aggressive hostility if their self-worth is dismissed, exemplifying threatened ego. Implicit self-esteem, an automatic and subconscious sense of self-regard, is differentiated from explicit self-esteem, which involves a more reflective self-assessment. Both forms are considered subcategories of self-esteem, but the legitimacy of implicit self-esteem as a concept remains doubtful due to inconsistencies in its correlation with explicit self-esteem and its inability to align consistently with other implicit self-esteem measures. Furthermore, criticism has been raised regarding the lack of scientific substantiation that self-esteem can be accurately gauged via implicit methods. The discussion then shifts to narcissism, defined as an intense self-love and inflated sense of individual significance. High scores on measures like Robert Raskin's Narcissistic Personality Inventory indicate strong narcissistic tendencies. However, there isn't a strong agreement between high self-esteem and high narcissism scores. It's possible for an individual to display high self-esteem but low narcissism, or vice versa. Interestingly, when focusing on the aspects of superiority or self-adulation in narcissism, its correlation with self-esteem significantly strengthens. In terms of characteristics, narcissism extends beyond amplified self-regard to include entitlement, exploitativeness, and dominance. While both narcissism and self-esteem involve a positive self-perception, they differ in their level of exaggeration, with narcissistic evaluations being overstated compared to the more modest self-views in non-narcissistic self-esteem. Therefore, despite their shared feature of positive self-regard, narcissism and self-esteem aren't interchangeable. Under threat, narcissists' inflated egos often react aggressively and combatively in what is known as threatened egotism. Meanwhile, characteristics of low self-esteem may include an exaggerated sensitivity to criticism, perfectionism, obsessive guilt over past mistakes, and an unjustified sense of hostility and defensiveness. Factors precipitating low self-esteem range from genetics and physical attributes to mental health concerns, economic status, impactful emotional experiences, societal stigmas, and peer or bullying pressures. Martin Ross's proposed classification outlines 3 states of self-esteem, each shaped by an individual's achievements or failures. In the first state, individuals have a low self-view underlined by feelings of being unlovable or unworthy. They are easily dominated by setbacks or shame and identify themselves by their perceived failures or anti-feat. An example of this could be feeling old. Self-depreciation is common in this state, with individuals expressing feelings of self-pity and disparagement. They're often debilitated by their melancholy. The second state is characterized by individuals with a generally favorable self-perception. However, they remain vulnerable to the dread of upcoming anti-feats, like embarrassment or discredit, transforming them into often anxious individuals. Defense mechanisms feature prominently, like diverting blame onto others to safeguard their self-image or avoiding decision-making. Paradoxically, their self-confidence may seem high, but this is often only a front for their fear of impending failure and self-esteem fragility. They may even deliberately lose in competitions to publicly disassociate themselves from the need to win and to maintain an illusion of indifference to social acceptance. Despite intensely wanting it, the driving force in this state is the fear of rejection by peers, compelling these individuals to make risky choices. The third represents those with robust self-esteem. They possess a positive self-image and sufficient resilience, such that failures do not overtake and diminish their self-worth. They harbor less apprehension about failure and generally have an air of humbleness and cheerfulness to them, indicative of their confidence to own their victories and unashamedly face their failures. They have no issue in acknowledging their mistakes due to the strength of their self-image. Their fear of losing social status is minimal. promoting an overall sense of happiness and well-being. However, it's important to note that no self-esteem state is resistant to change. Due to certain situational or life events, an individual's self-esteem level can change. Self-esteem can also be classified as contingent, deriving from external factors like others' opinions, personal successes or failures, and competence, or non-contingent, which is not determined by any external condition. It's through therapeutic interventions like metacognitive therapy, intertechnique, mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, rational emotive behavior therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and trait and construct therapies that progress can be made in improving a patient's self-esteem. The theme radically emphasizes on the intrinsic value and acceptance of an individual, which forms the foundation of non-contingent self-esteem. By postulating that an individual's worth is independent of any prerequisites, it gains its strength from the core tenet of unconditional acceptance. Theologian Paul Tillich eloquently espoused this belief, dismissing any virtue-based acceptability and advocating for the individual's inherent worthiness despite inevitable faults. In his seminal work, I'm Okay, You're Okay, psychiatrist Thomas A. Harris borrowed from Tillich's theological vision to underscore the genuine value in everyone, manifested linguistically as simply being okay. The cornerstone of stable self-esteem is a firm conviction in one's innate acceptability. Here, self-evaluation in distinct realms of life such as social, emotional, and academic performance is critical. A person's perception of their competency, particularly in social aspects, potentially influences their overall psychological health and self-esteem. It has been consistently established as a potential deterrent against victimization by bullying. The psychological stalwart Abraham Maslow emphasized that the fundamental acceptance, love, and respect for the core of a person by others and oneself underpin psychological health. Self-esteem is the catalyst for a more confident, optimistic approach to life. Facilitating goal attainment and self-fulfillment, it engenders a deep belief in one's right to happiness, promoting respectful, genuine interactions while curbing destructive relationships. In the perspective of philosopher Erich Fromm, self-love and love for others are interdependent, with an inclination for self-love indicative of the potential to express love for others. Self-esteem induces creativity, particularly significant in teaching professions, and was postulated by José Vicente Bonet, as its lack leads to self-rejection and aligns with major depressive disorder, as per Freud's claim. A significant detrimental impact on self-esteem can stem from widespread discriminatory attitudes, as highlighted in OJEB issues in the Yogyakarta Principles, a landmark document on international human rights law. The World Health Organization emphasis on the imperative nature of bolstering students' self-esteem to safeguard against mental distress and despair, thereby empowering them to effectively navigate stressful life situations. This reiterates the holistic significance of self-esteem in diverse domains of life. The role of self-esteem in academic success and overall life achievements was a preeminent assumption among many Americans between the late 1970s and early 1990s. Based on this belief, there was a development of various programs designed to boost the self-esteem of students despite these efforts. Peer-reviewed and controlled research on this subject was limited till the 1990s. Recent studies, however, have debunked these previous notions, indicating that artificially boosting students' self-esteem does not necessarily lead to improved grades. Research by Roy Baumeister implies that self-esteem inflation alone may actually negatively impact academic performance. This calls for a more critical analysis of the link between self-esteem and academic results. It's not so much that high self-esteem improves academic results, but that high academic performance can boost self-esteem due to the influences of social interactions and life events on this performance. Moreover, attempts to instill self-pride in students merely on the premise of their uniqueness as individuals is unlikely to bear fruit if these feelings of well-being are not combined with tangible achievements. Meaningful accomplishments that lead to justifiable pride are central to enhancing self-confidence and fostering further achievements. Interestingly, there's a strong correlation between high self-esteem and self-reported happiness. Whether this translates to a cause-effect relationship remains unproven. Notably, the tie between self-esteem and life satisfaction appears stronger in individualistic cultures. Self-esteem is also related to key aspects such as forgiveness in close relationships. For instance, individuals with high self-esteem tend to be more forgiving than those with low self-esteem. However, high self-esteem is not a safeguard against children engaging in unhealthy behaviors such as smoking, drinking, taking drugs, or early sexual activity. Additionally, self-esteem appears intertwined with mental health conditions, including depression, anxiety, and eating disorders. Low self-esteem potentially exacerbating these conditions, while high self-esteem potentially providing a layer of protection. In a 2014 study conducted by Robert S. Chavez and Todd F. Heatherton, a connection was discovered between self-esteem and the frontostriatal circuit, a pathway that links self-knowledge and feelings of motivation and reward. A stronger frontostriatal pathway equated to higher long-term self-esteem, while increased functional connectivity correlated with higher short-term self-esteem. The perks of having high self-esteem are twofold. It encourages initiative and fosters confidence. Those with high self-esteem are more likely to act on their convictions, engage with others, and try new things. Nonetheless, this confidence can also lead to reckless actions and ignoring prudent advice, stubbornly staking time and resources on lost causes. On the other hand, those with low self-esteem can experience temporary boosts with positive events, whether that is success, praise, or even physical appearance. However, this is a fleeting and turbulent pattern where the lack of positive feedback can lead to crashing lows if a person's self-esteem is contingent on such external factors. Then failure becomes exceptionally bitter, outweighing the sweetness of success. It has been proven that high self-esteem correlates with elements like life satisfaction, happiness, good health practices, perceived efficiency, and academic success. Harder 1987, Hubner 1987, Hawaii Heike 2005, Rumberger 1995, Swenson Perlow 2005, Yarchewski 2005, Yarchewski Gahan. However, it's essential to emphasize that high self-esteem is not synonymous with narcissism. People with healthy self-esteem accept and love themselves for who they are, recognizing their strengths and weaknesses. Narcissists, on the contrary, have a sense of worthlessness that triggers the creation of a false facade of importance. Their inflated self-esteem is unstable and reliant on external validation. The entire focus of a narcissist is self-preservation. They use tactics like denial, projection, and self-promotion to inflate their self-esteem. Their aggressive and domineering behavior often leads to a preference for high-status, competitive environments. Fundamentally, narcissism is a product of extremely low self-esteem and lack of self-love. But it uses denial and overcompensation as defense mechanisms to create an illusion of extreme self-esteem. In his desire to be ideal and perfect, the narcissist rejects the side he deems worthy of contempt, this destructive part within him. They strive to convince themselves and others of their worth by emphasizing their virtues, often leading to poor social skills due to their unrealistic self-perceptions and vulnerability to negative information.